Hello, you're watching Inside the Americas on France 24. In the show this week, the Panama Canal gets a makeover. It's wider, deeper, and once again fit for the world's biggest ships. 1 in 5 Puerto Ricans could soon have the Zika virus. Should women delay their pregnancies? France 24 travels to Puerto Rico to find out. And the longest-running insurgency in Latin America gets its own TV series. A Colombian telenovela warns of the challenges ahead as the FARC move towards peace. At first, though, the Panama Canal is once again able to accommodate the world's largest ships. The waterway connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans is more than a century old, and it had become too small for this era's supertankers. Years of re-engineering have supersized it for the 21st century. Claire Williams has this story.
48 meters wide and 300 meters long. The first ship makes its way down the expanded Panama Canal. Chinese-owned, it's one of the modern Neo-Panamax class of mega vessels. With more than 9,000 cargo containers on board, it passed through Panama City on its way to South Korea.
Somos la ruta que une a nuestro continente.
Ours is the route that unites our continent and the world, the Panama Canal.
Deseo agradecer
I want to thank and congratulate all the workers that participated in this monumental project.
The Panama Canal is now wider and deeper, so large ships like this one can pass. 3 new locks and a lane have also been added to accommodate more traffic. For decades, the 77-kilometre stretch of water linking the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans was running at overcapacity. Vessels had to queue up, and that drove down the amount Panama could charge shipping companies to use the canal.
It was a huge satisfaction to see this new vessel, the Neo Panamax, coming into these locks that took 7 years to build with a lot of effort and a lot of work and a lot of input from a lot of people.
After failed attempts by the Spanish, British and French, the United States opened the Panama Canal in 1914. It ran the waterway for 85 years until Panama took full ownership rights in 1999. The larger canal should have been operational 2 years ago, but cost overruns, labor strikes and management disputes set it back. The project cost $5.2 billion, but Panama hopes to now get $2 billion extra a year in revenue for the country.
Even though the Zika virus has dropped off the international headlines, it continues to spread across 50 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. Remember, this is the disease that causes brain defects in fetuses. Well, the United States has been relatively spared, except for one territory, Puerto Rico, where 20% of the population could become infected. Our reporters, Philip Crowther and Gallagher Fenwick, met one of the first pregnant women who contracted the disease.
She discovered that her body was carrying not just her second child, but also the dreaded Zika virus. Zulimaris Paredes from eastern Puerto Rico was bitten by a mosquito that gave her the disease. She decided to talk to us because, in her opinion, the inhabitants of this island need to know the risk is real.
This isn't fiction, this is real, and as mothers we are going through a very anxious time.
Her anxiety is that of all the women now living with Zika. If the virus also infects the fetus, the baby could be born with birth defects and severe brain damage.
What can I say? It's just really hard to live with this kind of uncertainty and not knowing whether my child will be infected or not.
Zulimares tells us that for now, her baby is developing normally, but she regularly visits a high-risk pregnancy unit in the capital, San Juan. Her doctor says he has seen a third of the 150 pregnant women who have Zika on the island. He shows us the cases that worry him the most.
The brain isn't growing the way it should. If you've never seen a sonogram, this might not seem all that dramatic, but it's very bad. This is dramatic.
Dr. De La Vega is convinced that the U.S. territory of Puerto Rico is on the verge of an epidemic that could hit up to 20% of the local population in the near future.
If you look at this figure of 20% and you apply it to pregnant women, then you're looking at 7,000 to 8,000 of them infected with Zika each year. That's out of a total of 35,000 to 40,000 pregnancies in Puerto Rico each year.
The island is currently going through a severe financial crisis, and the government is using its sometimes rudimentary means to kill off the mosquitoes that could carry the virus.
This is part of our fight against the Zika virus. We're fumigating these tires where mosquitoes can breed, but we're also doing this in the streets.
Disinfection is only one part of the work that needs to be done. Family planning centres have started their own campaigns to prevent the spread of the virus. The Health Secretary of Puerto Rico says women should consider delaying a pregnancy. The World Health Organization has issued the same advice for 46 countries facing the spread of the Zika virus.
Dating back to the 1970s and the seminal case of Roe versus Wade, abortion rights in the U.S. have time and time again been shaped by epic legal battles. Ben Barnier reports on one of the most important abortion rulings of the last quarter century. The Supreme Court has struck down a law that had shut down half the abortion centers in Texas.
Celebrating outside the U.S. Supreme Court, moments after 5 of the court's 8 justices struck down a 3-year-old Texas law which imposed strict restrictions on abortion clinics.
Today, women across America have had their constitutional rights vindicated. The Supreme Court has sent a clear message to the tactics of politicians who've used underhanded means to shut down abortion clinics.
The 2013 Texas law prompted half of the state's abortion centers to close. Under the law, clinics had to meet hospital-like standards, placing an undue burden on the ability to obtain an abortion, according to Justice Stephen Breyer.
We conclude that neither of these provisions offers medical benefits sufficient to justify the burdens upon access that each imposes. Each places a substantial obstacle in the path of women seeking a pre-viability abortion. Each constitutes an undue burden on abortion access, and each violates the federal constitution.
Abortion hurts women!
While the Supreme Court rebuked the state of Texas, abortion remains a divisive issue more than 40 years after the court legalized it.
I believe that women deserve better than abortion. Abortion is a picture that we have failed women. And so I don't just want abortion to be illegal, I want it to be unthinkable.
The court's ruling only applies to Texas, but it could affect more than a dozen states across the country that have adopted similar restrictions.
The Colombian government and the FARC guerrilla are on the brink of achieving a global and permanent peace deal to end the rebellion. That means Bogotá will have to mend ties with thousands of rebel soldiers who've spent their entire childhood in the jungle, a dramatic reality which has now become a Colombian TV drama. Mariam Saab has more.
A child soldier in the heartland of the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia. It's a scene from La Niña, a Colombian TV series which tells the story of a girl forced to make the ultimate sacrifice, join the ranks of the FARC to save her brother from certain death. Years later, she escapes. Free from the FARC, yet the horrors of life as a guerrilla fighter mean she's now a prisoner of her own demons, facing a new battle, the struggle to return to everything she once knew. It's a story rooted in the harsh reality of reintegration. Although the Colombian government has a 2-year rehabilitation program in place for former child soldiers, many are still falling through the cracks, burdened by a high incidence of mental health problems and drug abuse.
These children have not been protected prior to being removed. They were not protected in the camps, and once out, they're still exposed. There's a complete absence of responsibility for these children in the long term.
The TV series was launched ahead of a landmark accord between Colombia and the FARC. The deal will secure the release of fighters under 18 and children from the rebels' ranks. Given a new lease on life, they will be treated as victims of war under Colombian law and pardoned where possible.
Un niño puede comenzar de nuevo, un niño puede cambiar su chip de nuevo.
A child can start from scratch. A child can change. Children are able to adapt easily.
O sea, insisto en que nosotros, como adultos, como colombianos, como ciudadanos,
as adults, as citizens of Colombia, we have a responsibility to open our arms and help these children make a fresh start.
Y a que esto cambie y pues a darles la mano para seguir adelante.
To aid the transition, the UN will help oversee the children's reintegration into society. For decades, minors have been dragged into Colombia's civil conflict as the government, paramilitary groups and left-wing guerrillas fight for control. According to the Colombian Child Protection Agency, around 6,000 children have left armed groups in the last 17 years. 60% of those are from the FARC.
All right, that's it for this week's show. Inside the Americas is back next week. Same time, same place.